Kazel, a borderland territory. A severe drought had begun. People lay sprawled in the scorching heat, the well water completely dried up. A man with deep, dark circles under his eyes, his body shrunken from lack of water, stared dully into the well. The parched earth cracked and split. Dead animals littered the ground, swarming with flies. A family was silently moving through the night. The man carried a large sack. The woman led their child, gesturing for the child to be quiet. The people, filled with fear, were fleeing. Baron Kazel deemed this a grave crime. He sent his soldiers, equipped with helmets, armor, and horses, and they began to punish the people. A massacre ensued. The soldiers charged, relentlessly slaughtering the fleeing populace. The people ran without ceasing. A child stumbled, with a soldier wielding a sword in hot pursuit. The terrified child knelt on the ground, glancing behind. In their eyes, the soldier grinned, raising his sword high. Was there no one, anyone to help? Blood splattered. A white-haired man stood with folded arms, gazing into the barren forest. The leader of the rebellion, the son of Baron Kazel, a powerful sorcerer, said to have the blood of gods flowing through his veins. He gritted his teeth, looking at the scene before him. Even monsters knew to repay kindness. He clutched his chest, feigning pain. "You insects don't know why you're still alive." The woman held the child in her arms, looking up tearfully. "It's thanks to your grace, the grace of those with divine blood." He continued, "Yet you still try to flee because the heavens haven't rained in a while. How dare you be so insolent?" The woman wept. "I beg your pardon, please, spare the child at least." A soldier thrust a spear through her chest, silencing her. The child in her arms looked fearfully at the blood-soaked spear before them. The woman collapsed, dead. The child sat on the ground, staring at her. He feigned reproach. "How heartless can you be? This is no fun at all. I sincerely apologize for my ignorance, young master." He smiled cruelly. "What can we do to amuse you further?" On the barren land, he stood with folded arms, facing the hanged people. Behind him were the soldiers. Beneath the bodies of the men were women clinging to their legs, weeping bitterly. Mothers should help their children, and wives should support their husbands. He smiled and turned his head. "Young master." At his feet was a woman holding a severely wounded man. Blood was gushing from his wounds. He stepped on the man's head. "This one has been stabbed. Should I tie a rope around his waist? Otherwise, he'll die before we can have our fun. At least he should live as long as the others." Hearing this, the woman looked up, tears streaming down her face. The soldier wrapped the rope around the man's waist, ignoring the woman's pleas. "No, stop." The soldier roughly slapped the woman's cheek. "Get lost." She clutched her cheek and sobbed. The man was hanged. The rope wrapped several times around his waist, his shirt stained with blood. The girl stood below, clutching his legs, facing the man who was laughing gleefully with his hands in his pockets. With trembling hands, she held the man's legs. He hung there, his head lolling, blood flowing ceaselessly. "Magnificent," he said. Her tears continued to flow. "You've done well, peasant girl." He kept smiling. "Assist me as best you can. Understand?" He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Without you, your lover's veins would have burst, and he would have died. Please, don't underestimate the blood of the gods." He suddenly looked up. Zubek approached. He turned and grinned. Well, look who's here. If it isn't Sir Zabek." The other man stepped closer. He gave a lewd smile. "My swordsmanship teacher." Zubek remained calm. Was it necessary to go this far to punish one person? A noble with the blood of the gods should at least maintain his composure. He still smiled. "Would my reputation remain intact if news of what happened here hadn't spread? These fools dared to harm my honor simply because it hasn't rained in a while. That's why they're in this state." The two men faced each other. "So, what will you do? Will you spread word of what I've done, Sir Zabek?" He continued, "For you, a knight recognized by the Lord's Church, dare you dishonor the dignity of a noble as you claim to be?" Zubek was undeterred. "I simply mean that the truth cannot be hidden forever." Underneath the barren tree, the man folded his arms and feigned confusion. A soldier whispered in his ear, "Should we take care of him, my lord?" "Forget it," he replied. "Get me a whip." The whip was placed in his hand. He swung the whip, striking the woman hard on the back of her head. She screamed in agony. Zubek's eyes widened. The woman's screams echoed continuously. After a long while, he stopped and panted. Kosel gave a cruel smile. The woman, covered in bloody wounds, trembled as she cried and clung to the hanged man's legs. "Wonderful, truly a sight to behold." He turned to Zebek and smiled with satisfaction. As they passed each other, he whispered in his ear, "Smile, teacher." His eyes gleamed. "We should enjoy life, shouldn't we?" Zabek stood silently before the hanged bodies. The sun began to set behind the mountains. The bodies still hung suspended. Corpses littered the ground, their stench attracting flies. The man awoke, weakly reaching out to grasp Sophia's hand as she clung to his leg. "I was wrong," he croaked. "Please, run." She pursed her lips, tightening her grip around his leg. Standing up, they both gazed at the setting sun. "Ivan," she whispered. In her hand, she held a coin bearing the image of a star, a token from the emperor. Her eyes were filled with sorrow. "Will they really come?" she asked. Her eyelids fluttered shut. Night fell. A hand clad in iron gauntlets held a cup of water to her lips. She coughed a few times and awoke. Her vision blurred. "Who are you?" she asked. He spoke softly. "Shh, you are." He fed her a spoonful of food. "Can you eat?" Her eyes slowly regained focus. She lay there, covered by a cloak, as Zebek sat beside her, his sword resting on his lap. He looked up at the sky. A hand shook her gently. "Wake up." He turned to leave. "I came here in secret, so I must go. I'll be punished if the young master finds out." He continued, "As for your fiancé." He glanced at the hanged man. "He's dead. There's no need to keep him." The man was indeed lifeless. Sophia was stunned. The crutch fell from her hand. Zebek looked at her, puzzled. She clung to Ivan's legs and sobbed. She looked at him seriously. "Please, tell me your name. I'll ask the heraldry to forgive you when they arrive." Zebek was astonished. "The heraldry? You mean those heretical godslayers? You've pledged allegiance to them." Sophia bowed her head. He continued, "I don't know if they truly exist, but if they come here, Kozel has 20 of the best armed soldiers under his command, and me, along with the young master, a man of noble blood." His lips moved. "I'm sure you know by now what the sacred blood of Yigas is, don't you?" She bowed her head. "Even if he's a sorcerer, the heraldry can still kill him, because they are sorcerers too." Her eyes were filled with determination. "That's why they're called god-killers, isn't it? Because they're given that name after killing those with the blood of the gods." He rubbed his forehead. "You're delusional. No one can escape being traumatized after something like this." He extended his hand. "I'm Zebek, a holy knight of the royal church. I'm not asking for mercy by telling you my name." She looked at him in surprise. He gripped her hand tightly. "If they come, I'll fight them with everything I have." He turned to leave. "I'll be back tonight," she whispered. 2 days. On the ground, she drew a triangle with her foot. 2 days. In a peaceful village, under a clear blue sky, a hand extended a coin bearing the image of a star. "This is a gift for you, Sophia." She took it, curious. "What is it?" He smiled cheerfully. "Sophia, have you ever heard of the heraldry?" She looked at him, surprised. "Huh." He smiled and explained, "They're often mentioned in the stories my father used to tell me when I was young." She wondered, "They're the ones who slay gods and have no souls, right?" He nodded. They both looked at the coin. "That's right. This gold coin belongs to the emperor. It can summon the soulless ones." He whispered in her ear, "But be careful. If you possess this, the heretical servants of the Pope will come for you." He took the opportunity to kiss her cheek, and both of their faces turned red. Embarrassed, Sophia hit him. She wondered, "Wait, why would you give me such a dangerous gift?" He smiled. "I gave it to you for protection. If anything happens to us, they say to draw a triangle on the ground, then place this gold coin in the center. A messenger will come and help, although I hope we'll never need to use it." She looked down at the triangle drawn on the ground. Once more, she turned and hugged Ivan's lifeless body. 2 days, she repeated. Only 2 days. Flies had already begun to gather on his body. Only today. The sky was blue. If she held on tight, a gust of wind blew. Rain poured down, and she collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. A long time later, she awoke. The bright sunlight shone on the ground. Men were happily bathing in a cool stream. The shadow of a man stood there, shielding his eyes from the sun. Sunlight fell on his hand. "It's really hot today." A voice called out, and he glanced over. "Yes, teacher." Kozel approached, hands clasped behind his back. "Smile. Is something troubling you?" He turned. "If we kill the farmers, we won't be able to collect taxes later." He smiled, taking a handkerchief from a young man. "Those who are dissatisfied are migrating, while the number of thefts is increasing." His hand clenched. "In the Margrave territory, there's fertile land for people to evacuate to. Why should children born on fertile land?" The shirtless young man listened intently. He continued, "Have to suffer because of the wicked." Kozel frowned. "I'm talking about those who will destroy the fields and run away." He smiled. "Agriculture depends not only on an individual's skill but also on the land, climate, air, and light provided by the Lord." He chuckled. "Isn't that what the Lord and the Church have taught us?" The other man remained silent. He continued, "The reason for their drought is their disloyalty to the Lord's church. Isn't that what the scriptures say?" A wide grin spread across his face. "It's just a broader interpretation. The soldiers went to collect their belongings. Someone has made the land fertile. and someone else has caused the drought, so we must punish the guilty and reward those who contribute to the fertility of the land. He turned to leave. I'm doing this to save the people. His expression turned somber. So, if you want to disobey my orders and save them. His smile deepened. Then try your best. With that, he turned and walked away. The other man bowed his head in silence. As the sun set, the village was enveloped in darkness. A ragged man lay beside the well. Zubek approached. He looked down. Before him lay the hanged man and the unconscious girl. His hand tightened around his sword. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore. His shadow shielded the girl from the sun. As he had said, even if the messengers arrived now, it would be useless. The air was still. He looked at the two people before him. Suddenly, his eyes sharpened. A gust of wind blew, and a figure in black, armed with a bow and arrow, appeared, pointing a sword at his neck. I'll kill you if you move, so don't turn around, the figure said. He glanced at the sword pressed against his neck. A swordsman appearing in such a desolate place, and your technique is as eerie as a ghost. Are you a herald? He smiled. Are you a knight or a rescuer? I'm Zebek, from the Lord's Church. The figure replied, so you are. However, the sword didn't lower. I have to ask to be safe, but you're not the client, are you? It would be quite a sight if a holy knight of the Lord's Church initiated a contract. Zebek gritted his teeth. Are you trying to insult me? The figure remained silent. His gaze fell upon the girl on the ground. Then she must be my client. She's dead, so I'll get a free gold coin. He continued, can I know what's happening here? If you lower your sword and create some distance between us, I'll use my honor to tell you what's going on. He smiled and sheathed his sword, taking a step back. Zubek was astonished. Was he really a ghost? He raised his hand to his sword. It seems you're confident that you won't be easily attacked. If I don't ambush you, that is. The figure smiled. If you're truly a holy knight of the Lord's Church, then you should at least have some courage. Are you a sorcerer? Zubek asked. Everyone in the heraldry is a sorcerer, except for me. He was astonished. So you're saying that what you did just now wasn't magic? The other smiled. It's hard to distinguish superhuman physical abilities from magic. I don't understand what you're talking about. He looked up. What's your name? And what's your rank in the heraldry? The other man remained silent. Zubek continued. I've already told you my name. I'm Zebek from the Lord's Church. What about you? The man smiled and bowed slightly. I'm a Zayden of the 108th Soul, a messenger of the Emperor. Rank 108th Soul was the lowest rank in the heraldry, but the actions he had just performed proved that he was no ordinary person. The other man continued. So, as you promised, tell me what's going on. The two stood on a hill overlooking the city, the scorching sun beating down on the cracked earth. The man stood with his hands on his hips. What's going on, after all? White feathers fluttered down, and Zebek looked up in surprise. A bird circled overhead. The bird landed on Azadin's shoulder. The owl spoke. You have fulfilled the contract, but the client is dead. It seems you've earned a free gold coin, Azadin of the 108th Soul. Zebek was astonished. The owl is talking. The owl continued. Now start moving to complete the next task. Don't rest. Move immediately, Azadin of the 108th Soul. The man turned away in annoyance. Zebek called out, wait. He stood up straight. Just because the client is dead, you're going to take the reward and leave. That's strange. You should know your master will be at a loss. Zebek gripped the hilt of his sword. That won't happen. You, a seller of divine beings. A soulless one. His sword pointed at Azadin. Because I'll defeat you. The other man smiled. I think it would be unfair for someone to make me bleed with a sword, even you. That's sad. Zebek held his sword, silent. He charged forward. Are you mad? At who? Me, or yourself for turning your back on injustice? Zebek gritted his teeth. What do you know about it? Azadin stood straight. Do you know the constellations in the night sky, their names, and the myths associated with them? Zebek pondered. Why are you saying that now? What are you trying to say? He folded his arms and looked up at the sky. People can see the same thing, but everyone will have a different perception. For some, they might look like the main character in a legendary tale, but for others, they are nothing more than a faint light in the night. Azadin stepped forward. Just look at this devastated scene. Perhaps in your eyes, it looks different. He walked over to the body of the man hanging from the tree, comparing it to the gazes of the other soldiers. Zebek lowered his sword. No, there's no difference. He bowed his head. Because I can't do anything. He looked at the sword in his hand. The shining blade reflected his eyes. As a knight of the royal church, I must respect those with the blood of the gods. Azadin shook his head. I don't want to fight you, holy knight, if you feel sorry for that girl. He swung his sword, severing the rope. Ivan's body fell. He bent down and lifted it. Your sword is no match for mine. Zebek watched silently. The other man hoisted both bodies onto his shoulders. Do you have a shovel? A shovel, I say. Zubek looked hesitantly at the two bodies lying side by side. You want to? Zubek was astonished. You want to bury them? He smiled. I'll hold a funeral for them. He couldn't help but think, Kozel wants them to hang on the tree, becoming living corpses in agony. This would be a way for him to reaffirm his power. Thinking about this, Zubek couldn't help but sweat. Burying the bodies was essentially challenging him. As if reading Zubek's mind, he said, if you do nothing, you can't help them. Azadin used his hands to dig into the earth. Zubek remained silent. He clenched his fist and sheathed his sword. Together, they dug with their hands. Azadin looked up at the sky. Then he lowered his head and continued digging in silence, creating two graves side by side. The sky grew darker. Two graves with two crosses planted in front were completed. May their souls rest in peace, Azadin prayed. Zubek turned, a herald using the prayer of a savior. That's interesting. He chuckled. I like their philosophy. The two stood under the starry sky. What a reckless and insolent fellow, giving up his family's destiny to serve the faith of crime, Zubek said. The other continued, if I don't support what I believe is right, my birth will be meaningless. Zubek was curious. What do you like about the heraldry? Azadin unbuckled his belt. He took off the strap and held it up. From that direction, a dear friend of mine is approaching. Zubek turned his head in surprise. From a distance, Kozel rode on horseback, leading a group of soldiers. Well now, just in time. He smiled. You like the peasant woman, do you? You should have told me. And now, he faced them both. I must say, she's too good for a commoner living here. Zubek remained silent. He knew that he had been taking care of the girl, and there were about 20 armed soldiers. The soldiers lined up behind Kozel. Even he had no chance of winning. Kozel laughed. Incidentally, he looked at Azadin, who was knocking an arrow. Who is that scoundrel? He released the bowstring. The arrow flew. It pierced through the ranks of soldiers. The arrow struck the left eye of a soldier at the back. The soldier fell, and the entire team turned around in confusion. Zubek was astonished. He could hit the last soldier in line in this situation. He knocked another arrow. The arrow tore through the air. This time, the soldiers instinctively dodged to the side. A hand holding a shield moved suddenly. The soldier couldn't believe his eyes. The shield shattered and fell to the ground. The warrior looked up, tears streaming down his face. Another soldier fell to the arrow, and the others looked on in shock. They were all stunned by the sudden death of their comrades. Zubek couldn't believe his eyes. He had pierced through the shield. It even curved like a living snake. He smiled and took another arrow. As for your previous question, you asked what I liked about the heraldry, right? I like the idea that a person's value is not determined by where they were born, but by their ideals and actions. He drew the bowstring, like someone born with the blood of the gods who rapes and massacres his people. Kozel gritted his teeth and trembled. You. He aimed the bow. You cannot be considered noble. Kozel yelled, you bastard. Kozel pointed at Zebek. Zebek, this is an order. Kill that bastard. Before Kozel could finish his sentence, the man leaped into the air. In the moonlight, everyone looked up in astonishment. The soldiers gaped. Azadin released the bowstring. Another arrow pierced the eye socket of a soldier. He knocked two arrows at once. The air tore as he descended, and two more soldiers clutched their eye sockets. The soldiers panicked and rushed towards him. A fierce-looking one lunged forward. Die. Azadin landed on the man's spear. He used the momentum to jump high into the air. All the soldiers were amazed. Two more arrows were fired simultaneously. One soldier clutched his stomach, while another held his eye socket, screaming in pain. Kozel began to feel fear. When the next arrow pierced the eye socket of the soldier directly behind him, he realized that the man's motive wasn't to kill. Sitting on his horse, trembling, he shouted, "Who are you, damn it?" The voice echoed, "I've been standing behind you. My name is Azadin, and I'm a herald." Kozel's eyes widened in fear. The soldiers, upon hearing the word herald, trembled too. He's soulless. Kozel turned around in fear. Azadin raised his hand, but his quiver was empty. A fist landed on Kozel's face, and he fell from his horse, spitting out blood. Azadin sighed and reattached the strap to his quiver. He stood on horseback, looking at Kozel rolling on the ground. The remaining soldiers dared not approach. "Oh my eye," they cried. He jumped off the horse. From behind him, a soldier with a sword charged. Just as the soldier swung, Azadin leaned away. He swung his fist, and the soldier screamed, "Oh, my eye." Azadin picked up the sword. "I've reduced their numbers with arrows, so if you feel brave enough, come at me." He held the sword against the soldiers. As if suddenly remembering something, he said, "I forgot." He plunged the sword into the ground in front of the soldiers, and blood spurted out. The soldiers recoiled in fear. Wait, Why is he obsessed with castration? He turned his head. The soldiers instinctively backed away. He's crazy. The owl from before was still there, its eyes glowing in the night, uttering mournful cries. The remaining soldiers were all defeated, lying in pools of blood behind him. He walked over to Kosel, who was trying to crawl away. You've waited long enough, haven't you? Kosel trembled on the ground. Azadin stepped forward with his sword. You, a piece of trash, harming the people. A blinding golden light shone upon him. All the lying soldiers were blinded by the light. Master. A soldier shouted, I feel like I'm going blind. He forced his eyes open. The man stood in the light, smiling. What did you see? This is my magic. Kosel covered his face with his hands. Proof that noble blood is no match for your own. Azadin raised his sword before Kosel. The blood that flows through me. Kosel's eyes widened in horror. He knelt on the ground. Blood poured from his groin, and he screamed in pain. Azadin stood facing Kosel, who was holding his bloody crotch with both hands. What the hell did you do to me? He roared. Azadin laughed. Are you crazy? You still don't know what I did to you. He grabbed Kosel's hair. Wait, what are you doing? Kosel begged. Money, women, swords, I can give you anything. I'm a descendant of the Yigas family. A smile remained on Azadin's face. Really? Too bad for you. I'm a god killer, a herald. Kosel's pupils dilated in fear. Zubek stood behind, holding his forehead. Sir. Kosel screamed. Sir Zabek, what are you doing? Save me. Azadin nodded. I can see that. Damn it. Kosel continued to scream. You bastard. I'm a noble. I have noble blood. You did this to me just because I did that to the people. Azadin spoke softly. Think about it. Kosel grabbed Azadin's wrist. I think you'll continue to live with your resolve. I think you'll need it very much. A cold light flashed, and blood splattered across the ground. Kosel screamed and collapsed. I have no client, but I think I've been thoughtful. Azadin stood up with a dagger in his hand. The Emperor's law has been executed. I'm a knight of the royal church, Zabek declared. I can't let you go, you who speak of the Emperor's law. Azadin assumed a defensive stance, whether you do righteous deeds or not. The dagger in his hand fell. He smiled and waved his hand. You're not like the other knights of the royal church, Zabek shouted. How dare you insult me? Azadin shook his head. No, that's a compliment. The moonlight illuminated his face. The other knights of the royal church are nothing more than those expelled from their families due to inheritance issues. Zabek raised his sword. Regardless, a wind whipped around Azadin. Can you catch me? Zabek was surprised. What? In the strong wind, Azadin's voice echoed. We'll meet again if fate wills it, Sir Zabek. The wind died down, and Azadin was gone, leaving only Kosel's body behind. Zabek looked around. No one can kill Azadin of the heraldry. The soldiers, who had just recovered, shivered. Instead, we'll have to bear the permanent scars. The absurd ones expelled from their families due to inheritance issues, he thought. He wasn't wrong. Zabek looked up at the sky. Now I can feel the weight in my chest. In a certain building, people were kneeling before a man sitting on a high chair. Please, Lord, exempt us from taxes this year. A man kneeling on the ground spoke. I beg you. People are fleeing and becoming nomads. Many are starving and wandering the roads. We are racing against monsters and thieves, and I apologize sincerely. We are unable to pay taxes. The man rested his hand on his temple. Sunlight shone on him. How shameless. Margrave Kosel's eyes flashed. At this rate, you'll surely start begging. The kneeling man trembled. The farmers knelt and pleaded, forgive us, we're in no position to do that. He was stern. Nothing can change the low blood flowing within you. If you want, I'll give you help. The three leaders looked up in surprise. What? Are you serious? He smiled. Of course, on the condition that if you can't fulfill my request, all of you will be hanged. Below, there was a moment of silence. Everyone looked at each other, whispering. A red flame ignited in his palm. Don't be afraid. What you're asking for is just a piece of paper. A book appeared above his head, amidst the red flames. It was the essence of this magical book. Everyone bowed deeply. A magical book. The leader placed a hand on his chest. We know nothing about magic and such things. He smiled. No, even fools like you can find it. A glowing page appeared. If you only want that, it will answer your call and tell no one. He stated the condition. If you can bring me a magical book like this, I will exempt your village from taxes for 3 years and provide 50 baskets of barley and oats for each person. Everyone was astonished. A gray-haired man eagerly asked, please, but can we know the name of the book for our convenience? Margrave Kosel smiled and clapped his hands. A black snake slithered out from behind the curtain. The snake raised its head and flicked its tongue. Margrave Kosel looked down. A beautiful woman appeared. I must say, mentioning the gods' books is quite careless, Count. He retorted, no. You're all looking for magical books, aren't you? Rumors will spread across the continent no matter what. It would be wiser to find one page first. He clasped his hands. So, what do you have, witch? She extended her hand. I must say, your son became a victim, on the eastern continent, Sir Kozel. He seemed disbelieving. Kozel's army wouldn't be defeated so easily, and Zebek was with them. She continued. His opponent was the heraldry. Margrave Castle began to be surprised. The heraldry. She paused before answering. I'm quite sure they're also searching for the Lord's book. If they want to escape their destined fate, they'll definitely need it. Margrave Castle repeated. Kozel is dead. She replied. I heard he lost sight in both eyes and was also injured in his private parts. What will you do? He gestured. Send soldiers to that area and eliminate the heraldry. Margrave Castle held her hand. No, order someone else to do it. She sat on Margrave Castle's lap, and his hand stroked her cheek. If I lose my son, I'll have another. His thumb brushed against the witch's lips. The sky was bright. The water in the bottle had run dry. He walked with the owl on his shoulder. Damn it, I'm going to die of thirst at this rate. He continued walking. Why did you have to perform that show? You even said you could do it in 2 days. You fool. How dare you say such nonsense to the emperor? The owl was silent. He continued to complain. Really, because the emperor died without a plan, we, his messengers, are now despised by people all over the world. We're called god-killers and soulless heretics. The owl shivered. Moreover, because you showed the clients, I had to abandon my luggage and run as fast as I could. Thank you for that. Now I'm parched and about to die. I only have dry food to eat, and I don't think I can digest it, so I guess I'll starve to death soon. Suddenly, he noticed something. The owl shrank back. I'm sorry, but if earlier, the man, his steps halted. He gripped his sword. Is it a ghost? A green light gathered on the empty land in front of them. Images appeared. Ah, those who were hanged on the tree. The people bowed to him. Azadi nodded in return. Hello. One of them said, this land has no light of kings nor blessings of the Lord. It's not a good place to stay long. I've avenged you, so please go and reincarnate. The girl in the group pointed in a direction. He looked where she was pointing. It was a well. He walked over to it. You mean for me to drink from it? You don't have to do that. You can go and rest. Azaden looked into the well. He pulled the rope. As he pulled, he thought, I want to taste it right now. The bucket was pulled up, but instead of water, there was a piece of paper inside. What is this? On the sea, ships sailed in a line, the rain pouring down. The heraldry, originally a race called Aragasa, had come from another continent, braving a great storm at sea and landing on the continent of Wibris. The ship tilted as if about to sink. Those on board helped each other ashore. 8 divine kings of the Yigas clan ruled the entire continent of Wibris, initially holding 8 thrones. The scene of a man appeared at the window. However, at that time, one person had monopolized the throne, while the remaining 7, though brothers, were all controlled by the emperor of the Yazelot clan. The old man, with long white beard, sat with his chin resting on his hand. The emperor, Yazelot, wants to eliminate all remnants of the previous divine kings. Another man, though only middle-aged, had white hair as well. Meanwhile, the Aragasa immigrants need a place to settle. The emperor passed on to the outsiders the song of the golden bird and a spirit called the emperor's voice. Everyone knelt on one knee, placing a hand on their left chest in a sign of respect. In return, those people had made a pact with the emperor and became his messengers. The old man with long silver hair continued. Thus, cruelly, the hands of the Aragasa people were stained with the blood of the Lord. The man with the sword stood on a pile of corpses. They became the emperor's swords, his administrators and executioners. And one person directly dealt with the nobles who went against the emperor's law. He succeeded. That was the most terrible crime the people of Wibris committed when they believed in the afterlife and reincarnation for eternal life. He slumped in his chair, alone. Because of that, when the emperor died, the empire was divided into 8 kingdoms once again. In the desolate ruins, the Aragasa were despised by the people of Wibris and the heroes. They fell and were called soulless messengers, but they faced an unexpected problem. A scroll bound by chains, the pact with the emperor, was still in effect. The man was bound by countless chains. Even though the emperor was dead, they still had to continue serving as the emperor's messengers. However, a crack appeared on the chain around his wrist. A piece of paper with strange characters was placed in a bucket of water. He held the paper in his hand before the sunlight. Is this a page of a divine king's book? Could this be the source of the emperor's power? The spirits waved at him. Thank you. Please rest in peace. He bowed his head, looking at the paper in his hand. The owl on his shoulder also looked at it. If I collect this, can I escape the curse? It's rude to call it a curse. It's a noble duty according to the contract. He continued walking. But I'm worried that this news will soon spread throughout the world. The reason the pages of the Divine King's book weren't separated at the beginning was because of my father. Both walked on the barren land. Water. I'm so thirsty. A figure watched them from behind a large rock. That's him. Both continued forward. The owl turned to talk to him. The son of the worst traitor of the clan. He's incompetent, weak, and stupid. The two behind the rock were curious. Is it really true that he can't use magic as the rumors say? He's cursed. The boy was confused. I don't know if he's cursed, but I know for sure he can't use magic. The girl smiled. I heard he wet the bed until he was 8 and couldn't even string a bow. Her smile turned crooked. I can't believe he could carry out the mission of a messenger. The boy was alarmed. So, medium, or should we go back? You don't need to work for a low-ranking messenger while you're a relative of the contractor. She drew an arrow. So we'll test his skills. He shouted, no, an assistant can't attack a messenger. She laughed. Who cares? If I win, his position will be mine, and I won't lose. He worried. The arrow fell to the ground. He's a student of the grumpy old man Kaz's, and there's always an if in every situation. She lowered her head. That doesn't matter. No matter how skilled Kaz's is, a fool is still a fool. Even if he trains for 10 or even 100 years. Her eyes flashed with anger. The son of a traitor. One who can't even use magic. A messenger. She raised her bow. He's just taking up space, preventing people with abilities like me from becoming a messenger. The arrow flew. He suddenly stopped. She sat behind the rock, looking triumphant. She glanced behind her. When she peeked out from behind the rock, she gaped in astonishment. A small stone flew right between her eyebrows, making her cry out in pain. He was standing on the rock in front of them. He bent down and looked at them. Was that arrow meant for me? She smiled, still holding her forehead. That was a greeting. How long have you been here? I couldn't sense your presence at all. She looked at the 2 arrows in his quiver. Wait, don't tell me you caught the arrows I shot in your quiver. He stood on the rock, looking at the 2 people in front of him. What are your names? She lowered her eyes slightly. I'm Midian, from Ether. And I'm Ishmael. We're assistants assigned to assist you. He repeated, assist me. He released his hand, and the arrow fell. Is this it? She protested. Your quiver is empty, so I wanted to give you my arrow. Isn't that the best support? He turned around. It seems you've applied to be my assistant because you're bored in the Holy Land. She was surprised. Go home, kid. He continued walking. I've told you, I'm of the Ether bloodline. He stood on a high rock, looking down. You don't know that bloodline means nothing to messengers, and if both of you are working for me now, you're my subordinates. And you even shot an arrow at me. He lowered his head. Perhaps you want me to teach you what happens when you do that to me outside the Holy Land. She was unconvinced. Looking up, he's so different from the rumors. I wonder if he's really like that, a mocked and bullied person. He stood with his back to the light. Excuse me for being rude, Midian, and if you want something from me, then show some respect. As a member of Aragasa or my enemy, it's up to you. She gritted her teeth in anger. She shouted, I, Midian from Ether, apologize for my rudeness to Messenger Azaden. I am an Aragasa. He smiled. I accept your apology. She bowed her head. However, from now on, don't shoot your arrows at anyone unless you intend to kill them. Don't use weapons outside the Holy Land. Understood? He turned around. I won't speak ill of you when I return to the Holy Land. I don't need assistance. He suddenly remembered. Oh. He turned back. Do you two have water? She shouted. I want a duel. The boy beside her was astonished. Midian. He stopped her. No. He's very dangerous. She clenched her fist. Yes, he's very different from the rumors. Forget the fool in the rumors. He's strong, intelligent, and proud. But I wonder if I'm a coward if I don't challenge him just because he's strong. She stood up and shouted, Messenger Azaden, I, Midian from Ether, formally challenge you for your position as a messenger. He stood on the rock, facing her. She remained stubborn, and Ishmael was already panicking. She's actually doing it. He scratched his head. Oh dear, a fight. Ariel has had a bad influence on these kids. He braced himself. You'll take my position if you win. But have you considered what will happen if I win? Of course, everything of mine, including my life, will be yours. I'm ready, he pondered, putting aside the Ariel issue. The bigger problem was that she seemed to underestimate him. She braced herself. You can give up before it's too late. Ariel is the only one who can defeat a messenger. I know I don't have the best reputation, but I can't just hand this position to anyone without a reason. She turned to leave. Ishmael called out, Midian. She walked away, shouting, Now, we're 100 paces apart, Azaden. I challenge you. A voice echoed from the sky. The owl circled overhead. Ishmael looked up in shock. The challenge is accepted. Messenger Azaden. The trial begins. Midian was astonished. This is the voice of the emperor. He scratched his cheek. Oh really? Ishmael sighed. Oh dear. The voice of the emperor is a spirit given to each messenger. Now that the voice of the emperor has borne witness, refusing her challenge is impossible. She worried, this can't be. Then she shouted, I will win. The sunlight shone brightly on the ground. A waterskin was handed to him. The two disheveled figures stood before him. He tilted his head back and took a sip of water. Ishmael was at a loss for words. He gritted his teeth. What the hell is happening? An archery technique suitable for the battlefield, sacrificing accuracy for speed. From above, 3 arrows shot down, creating craters around her. It was definitely an extreme form of aragasa technique. She gritted her teeth and looked up. Midiam created a shield around herself, blocking the flying dirt and arrows. He drew his bow, no longer arrows but pebbles. The pebbles flew, shattering the shield and hitting Midiam. She was hit in the stomach and staggered. Before she could steady herself, she had to tilt her head to avoid another flying pebble. He sat calmly drinking water. I thought he couldn't use magic, but he used the natural beauty of the wild goose, somehow. The two looked at him silently. They couldn't believe it. She stood with her sword drawn. Night had fallen. She gritted her teeth, maintaining her stance. A red light shot straight at her. She jumped high to avoid it. She lunged forward, just then. On the rock, it was empty. He leaned slightly. Excellent. I guessed right. Her eyes were filled with anger. I'll catch you, Azzedine. He dodged her sword. The blade slid past, and she stared in shock at his bisected body, which dissolved into smoke. She was stunned. What? A shout came. Midiam. Behind you. She quickly turned around. A red symbol appeared on her hand. He raised his hand to stop her. With one hand, he held her hand high, and with the other, he clenched his fist. He gathered his strength. And she opened her mouth in surprise. With a loud bang, she fell backward into the large crater. Ishmael shouted, his eyes welling up. Azzedine, a blood relative of a traitor, has just defeated the most noble-blooded. He couldn't believe it, running over. This is impossible. You bastard, how dare you? She curled up in the crater. He looked at Azzedine, who was still standing. His voice echoed, the battle is over. Midiam of Ether, you challenged the position of messenger and failed. Your fate now lies in the hands of messenger Azzedine. His voice remained solemn. And Ishmael, because you interfered in the battle between Midiam and Azzedine, you will also become property of the messenger along with Midiam. She gritted her teeth in anger, her whole body trembling. She pulled out her short sword. Suddenly, she wanted to stab herself in the neck. Ishmael looked at her in shock, and shouted, Midiam. A stone flew and knocked the dagger out of her hand. It fell to the ground. He sat in front of her. I knew you would try that. She collapsed, and Ishmael cried out, Midiam. He sat there, young girl. After losing, you don't even have the right to die. You can only die when I die, or when I want you to die. She gritted her teeth angrily. You challenged me without knowing that. He smiled, closing the water flask. So childish. The water skin was thrown to Ishmael, and he caught it in surprise. He stood up. I think that's enough to teach you a lesson. I'll set you both free. She was astonished, while Ishmael was overjoyed. What? Really? He turned around. I told you, I don't need servants. I've given you your freedom. Go back to the Holy Land. She shouted angrily. Why? There's a young, beautiful girl willing to serve you, and you just drive her away. Ishmael sighed. Midiam. He didn't turn around. I don't know what beauty is, but if you have talents like Ri, you wouldn't have lost. He turned slightly. There are many young men in the world who like younger girls, and many cultures have early marriage customs. It would be wiser to think carefully before proposing marriage next time. Ishmael was speechless. Midiam lowered her head. Actually, don't ever challenge anyone again. If there's someone you want to kill, just assassinate them. Ishmael was speechless. He's talking more than I expected, but it seems he's saying these things out of genuine concern. Midiam trembled and spoke. Here. Ishmael turned to look. She smiled. It was a new expression. Ishmael was shocked. What? The image of a man slumped on a throne appeared. The emperor and the Aragasa clan provided each other with what they needed, and anyone who betrayed would face a horrible death. This pact was once a symbol of loyalty and a sign of honor, but after the emperor's death, it became a terrible curse. Even though he was dead, it still held power, binding the Aragasa clan forever as the emperor's messengers. It seemed that the endless cycle of servitude began to show signs of breaking when the heraldry intervened in the War of Succession for the Kingdom of Terasar. The Aragasa had won the war for the throne and obtained a copy of the Divine King's book. However, a traitor stole the book and fled. A figure with numerous scars on his back. His name was Acker. 3 people stood on the edge of a cliff, looking at the man chained up. Traitor Acker, return what you stole, or the curse will kill you. They looked at the chained man kneeling. hand over the copy of the Divine King's book immediately before suffering a terrible fate. Despite being chained, the man smiled. The clan has threatened Acker with every means, but their hopes have shattered and finally vanished. A man in black stood at the edge of the abyss, surrounded by flying papers, because Acker destroyed the book in the central mountain range of the world. Therefore, Acker became the first to die from the curse of the contract. Due to the curse, he gave birth to twins despite being male. Azadine and Ariel, twin children. As time passed, Ariel became the strongest messenger in the history of the clan. He scratched his head, and Azadine was rumored to be a fool. Two people followed behind him, one with a look of dissatisfaction, the other with a look of resignation. Who spread that rumor? A fool. He's not like that at all. He walked on. I've made it clear. He turned to look at the two. I have no intention of hiring you, so don't follow me. She smiled awkwardly. We're not following you, we just have something to deliver. A letter was handed over. This is a letter from the leader of the Salasma region. He took it and read it. The old man doesn't like me very much. He opened the letter. All right. Ignoring the scolding about the missed reports, some copies of the Divine King's books have appeared recently. Go get them. It will be reflected in your performance evaluation. Based on what's written here, other messengers must know about the copies. He turned to look at the two. It says here that copies of the Divine King's books have appeared recently. Do you know anything about this? She was delighted. Yes, we know. Your father betrayed the clan, and Ishmael was terrified. He kicked her. She turned around angrily. Ouch. What was that for? He spoke up. Enough. So both of you know about it, huh? He pondered. Now I have to go to Salasma to meet the regional leader. She was excited. Yes, we know. We're going to the same place. So can you let us follow you? I can tell you about what's happening in the clan. He sighed. Since this isn't my path, you can follow if you want. She happily skipped. All right. Ishmael sighed helplessly behind her. The sky was clear and sunny. The three of them and two oxen rested under the shade of a tree. He turned around. He stretched and yawned. The other two were also awakened. Let's go. The clouds drifted lazily. Two men led the oxen slowly. She sighed. Spring has arrived. The trees were green and the stream flowed gently. The three of them took water from the stream. A voice rang out, startling them. Hey! Several men appeared. Who said you could take water from our stream? He waved his hand to stop Midiam from taking out her weapon. I don't intend to fight you. What do you want? The man grinned. Of course, everything. He asked again to be sure. Is there really no way to compromise? They stood in a line blocking the way. You talk too much, another man sneered. What's with that mask? Who are you? A clown? The leader pointed. Kill the men, capture the women. All right. A moment later, they were kneeling before the three. Please spare us. We're just innocent people. Ishmael spoke up. You're not robbers. The man put his hand on his chest. We were just conscripted. Margrave Kozal's son was. They begged. We're begging you. We know nothing about any book. She crossed her arms. If you're just robbers and you're making this up, I suspect this isn't a road that merchants or travelers would take. She looked at them suspiciously. All right, let's just kill them so they can't harm anyone else. Wait. He stopped her. Midiam, I don't kill people without a reason. She protested. Hey. Ishmael nodded. You're right. Even if they are really good people, there's a chance we might be discovered if we let them live. He still disagreed. But that doesn't mean we should kill them just to be safe. Everyone deserves a second chance. The others were overjoyed. Yes, of course. Life is precious to human beings. You're such a noble person. The man raised his head. You're the best person ever. I guarantee you and your family will always be happy because of your kind heart. He frowned. Shut up. Ishmael muttered. I often see some people refuse to kill, but it's hard to believe when it's someone from the heraldry. He landed a punch on the man, and the man fell to the ground trembling. Good. One punch has ruined his eye. The others in the group trembled. We told you not to move too much. One wrong move and your face will be like his. But you promised to spare us. He smiled. Yes, I will spare you, but only after inflicting permanent injuries so you can't harm anyone else, even if you don't immediately repent. The two behind him didn't know what to say. I think that's fine. I guess so. The owl perched on a tree heard the shouting. A giant creature appeared, dragging the leader by the hair. The creature roared and threw the man into a sack behind its back. It grabbed another man by the leg and lifted him up. The others screamed in fear. The creature grinned and looked at the city in the distance. It drooled. Humans, villages, large and sturdy fortresses, meat everywhere. It roared and threw the man into the sack. It looked at the small goblins tearing apart a man. It grinned and said, You belong to me, Goldu. It roared and threw the torn man into the sack. It looked at the terrified remaining men. You belong to me, Goldu. It grinned, its eyes fixed on the distant city. Humans, villages, large and sturdy fortresses, meet everywhere. The three rode on, continuing their journey. He rode ahead. At first, I thought he was just pretending to be relaxed, so it was surprising. Her eyes sparkled, but I guess it wasn't an act. We even retrieved all our weapons. He stroked the creature. It's hard to understand others if you're not in their shoes. He recalled the people he had blinded. Losing an eye has a bigger impact than you think. Those who used to be victims in their attacks are now the ones they fear. He opened his mouth. I'm sure this is a good opportunity for them to repent for their past actions. Ishmael pondered. A chance to repent. A bird soared in the sky. He's changed them. He even gave them a chance to cleanse their souls. He led the oxen forward. He turned to look at the two, although the conversation bored me. Which conversation? He repeated. They said Margrave Khazal is looking for copies of the Divine King's book. Ishmael was vague, but Margrave Khazal lost the War of Succession. Do you think he's trying to upgrade himself by using the book to gain magical powers? He held his forehead. A political figure determined to gain power. It's dangerous. I'll have to take off my mask because it's a sign that I'm a messenger. They were both surprised. Huh? They looked at him in unison. You can't see. They fell silent. He took off his cloak. Ishmael was still in shock. But, you have no problem at all even though you can't see. How is that possible? I don't know either. I've been able to see without eyes since birth. She walked closer to examine him. He spoke up. Something is wrong. Just say what you're thinking if you want. She hesitated. You look better if you think you're injured. What? She explained. It seems like you've been hot after the accident. The bad luck after losing your sight. I feel like it would be better to have a scar than a hot face with ugly eyes. Ishmael interrupted. Midiam, now you're being rude. He turned away. She's speaking as if she was the one who caused the injury on my face. It was Ariel. She said I was strange for not having what I should have there, and she could at least imagine the eyes would appear where they were supposed to be if she left a scar there. She cut across my face and said it would be better. He turned away. Thanks to that, I can pretend to be blind. I don't have any problems when I'm alone, but, she interrupted, oh, so we should also pretend that you're blind, right? He led the oxen forward. Yes. All three stood looking at the sunlight shining on the city gate. People were lining up for inspection before entering the city. Ishmael spoke up. I can see the gate, but the queue is quite long. It's been a long time since I last came to the east gate. Midiam folded her arms. This is also a village, the starting point of the royal road. Don't you think it's a great starting point for our journey? Shut up. I'm a pilgrim on a solitary journey, and you two are just kids joining along. He was suddenly startled. He muttered, purple eyes. The soldier in front was almost stripped naked for inspection. Is it like this when you came here last time? The soldier searched everything, taking valuable items. They were worried. Basically, they're stealing. No, things aren't that bad when we came here last time. He whispered, I see. They're looking for something. If they're searching this thoroughly, then, someone asked him, hey, can't you see? Oh, I'm sorry. The two are orphans traveling with me. The man sighed. Oh dear. It must be difficult. Not really, but what's happening ahead? The man explained, haven't you heard the rumor that there are copies of the Divine King's book circulating? The Book of the Divine King. Yes. There's a rumor that a member of the heraldry made copies of this book after stealing it, and these copies are appearing all over the world. The bastards under Margrave Khazal are hunting them right now, but they're a bunch of brats. He nodded. So there's more than one loser like that, huh? Nothing. He pondered. This isn't good. This is going to be a bit troublesome. A loud cry. I need that money to feed my family. The man begged the soldier. You're searching for the Divine King's book, so why take my money? We'll give it back to you if it's not the book. The soldier slapped him hard. Get lost. The man fell to the ground in front of the indifferent soldiers. A little girl shouted, this is stealing. Stealing is bad. Give it back. The soldier sneered, you little bitch. He broke the girl's arm, and she cried out. The man hugged the girl. Stop. You're bullying a child. A punch landed on his stomach. He curled up in pain. The soldiers laughed. Shut up. The man who had been asking questions looked up. What's going on? Why are you packing up? One of the soldiers whispered, there's a monster nearby. The man was shocked. What? The soldiers started to pack up. We need to leave now. A loud roar echoed in the distance. The man on the tower looked out. You've locked the gate, right? The soldier confirmed. Yes, sir. We've made sure. Good. We can leave with what we've taken. A man ran up. Sir Tarkiev. Sir Tarkiev. He looked disinterested. What is it? The man was terrified. What should we do? There's a monster outside. He crossed his legs and sat down. You've been trained enough to deal with them. Just do it. The man was stunned. But you only trained us for one day. Besides, at least let the people outside in. I'll command the defense here. He clasped his hands. You're not even a knight. What are you going to do? I don't want to hear it from a runaway knight. He smiled. All right, I'll leave that to you. Is that good enough? The caravan drove away in the twilight. He stood and sensed the ground. The birds scattered, shaking. The man covered in blood sat huddled. Where should we go now? Will we be eaten by monsters? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. He opened his wide eyes. The noise outside was getting louder. Meat, meat, meat. Countless monsters swarmed in. The people screamed. The man on the tower looked at the fire in the distance. He was shocked. Many people were still locked outside. It was coming. In the darkness, a group of people trudged on. The woman held an oil lamp and turned to look around. She turned to the three of them. The road ahead will be even harder. She handed the oil lamp to Ishmael. Take good care of your sister and uncle. This is a spare lamp. Keep it. Ishmael smiled. Thank you. We'll take care of them. Don't worry. He sighed. It seems people will be friendlier if I pretend to be blind. People were still gathered in front of the city gate. The knights and mercenaries had left. A man shouted, but we have to protect the village. I ask those who can fight to stay and fight with us. People started discussing. Cosette, her father and I will fight. I'll protect you. Cosette, what? You can't even cut an apple, Dad. He sighed. She gritted her teeth. I can't believe the dragon knights who live to serve the people would harm the people they're supposed to protect. It's shameful. It's a failure and it's ugly. He spoke up. They may be people of Wibris, but they're chasing away the people they're supposed to protect. It seems they consider it a great act. She stroked her chin. I guess so. It would be strange for an Aragasan to sympathize with the people of Wibris. He replied, It's okay. I feel the same. The night wind blew. Let's leave this place. He disappeared into the wind. She was surprised. Huh? A shout echoed. Wait, uncle. Where are you going? In the darkness, the city gate remained closed. People inside were armed with bows, arrows, spears, and halberds. One person exclaimed, Oh my God, there's so many. The leading demon spoke. I am Goldu. He slammed a crate down, revealing a hand. We store meat for a long time. We know, the humans replied. Clever demons. The human village, big, strong fortress. He stomped his foot. So much meat. The commander raised his hand. Archers, fire at them. Arrows flew. The small demons covered their heads to avoid the rain of arrows. The leader behind commanded, Go, break down the gate while we have the chance. The demons rushed forward. The commander shouted, Protect the gate, shoot the ones that are close. A large rock was thrown at the gate. The gate was severely damaged. The demons outside worked hard to break down the gate. A large rock was thrown and hit the wall. People on top fell down. He landed behind them, surprising them. He nodded. I'll help you protect the gate. The commander was surprised. Who are you? He took out his bow and knocked an arrow. Just a messenger of the emperor. Everyone was astonished. A messenger of the emperor. You mean the heraldry? He jumped off the wall before anyone could react. He landed on the head of a demon and bounced off. 2 arrows pierced the eye sockets of a demon, and it roared. Pain made it furious. It swung its arms wildly. He landed on its head again. I'll kill you. All of you. The blinded demon trampled on its own minions. He smiled. Yes, you're moving well. From the top of Goldu's head, he drew his bow and aimed at the eyes of the small demons. People on the wall watched in astonishment. Is he really a god killer? He lowered his head and looked at the sack rolling on the ground. A survivor crawled out. He looked terrified. In front of him was a long-nosed demon staggering towards him. It grinned evilly. The Book of the Divine King. The Book of the Divine King is near. Its mouth opened wide. Drooling. I will be the king of the monsters. A gust of wind blew. He was still sitting on top of Goldu's head, turning around. What's that? A red monster with many lumps and giant, sharp-toothed mouths was approaching. It seemed difficult to deal with. Note, I've tried to capture the dramatic and intense tone of the original text while ensuring a smooth flow and natural-sounding English. I've also paid attention to the specific details and nuances of the story, such as the characters' motivations and the evolving conflict. Azzadine jumped onto Golju's head and leaped high into the air, just as Godkin lunged at Golju. The two monsters entangled, locked in a life-or-death struggle. Golju, wrapped tightly by Godkin, began to moan in pain. It hurts. Golju is in pain. I like to eat but I don't like to become... Before Golju could finish, Godkin swallowed him whole. Azzadine had just landed when he witnessed this scene. The villagers on the wall were speechless in horror. What? What is that? Azzadine stood below, facing Godkin and spoke. Godkin, king of fangs. Suddenly, Azzadine saw Godkin, who had been a mass of writhing flesh, evolve into a monstrous creature. It grinned wickedly and launched an attack towards Azzadine's chest. Azzadine touched the spot where the attack landed but found no trace of injury, which surprised him. Godkin spoke. Now, servants of Yigas, "Bring me the book of the divine king." It continued, "If you do, I will grant you a painless death. Otherwise." Before it could finish, Azadin shot an arrow straight at it. Godkin was enraged. "How dare you?" But then it stopped, as if remembering something. It thought, was that light the divine book? Thinking of this, it charged towards Azadin. Azadin dodged and thought, why are these people searching for copies of the divine book? Godkin's attacks were relentless, and the small demons around him were caught in the crossfire. Godkin roared with satisfaction. "It's wonderful." Azadin dodged and searched for an opportunity to strike. Finally, he managed to use his arrow to pin a few of its tentacles to the ground. Drawing his sword, he made a few precise cuts, severing the tentacles. He said nonchalantly, "These teeth are too big for you." As he spoke, he looked at the giant teeth he had cut off and left on the ground. Fangs without feet are easy to lose. This infuriated Godkin. It roared, "Shut up! I am the king of fangs." Godkin went berserk and attacked Azadin. Azadin was ready, but he continued to say, "No, no, you're worthless." The two engaged in a fierce battle. Then Azadin threw away his sword, thinking, "It seems this substance can corrode any metal." Godkin took this opportunity to lunge at him, roaring, "Die!" But strangely, Azadin thought, will I lose my reward for this? Just as Godkin was about to strike, two arrows flew from behind. A man commanding the defense shouted, "We must help the member of the Herald clan no matter what." A soldier there spoke up, "But helping the Herald clan." Another person continued, "If the Church of the King hears about this, we will be punished." The apparent leader shouted, "The Church of the King has abandoned us. What right do they have to punish us?" Someone else bit their lip, then drew their bow and fired an arrow. Trembling, he said, "I don't want to die here." He suddenly shouted, "We only attack the monsters. After we defeat the monster, we can join the Herald clan or anywhere else." Everyone seemed to wake up, and they started firing arrows at the monster. "Yes, let's attack the monster first." Seeing this, Azadin smiled. He thought, they should have given me those arrows. He turned serious and picked up a demon's tooth. "And now, it's my turn." He threw the tooth at Godkin, injuring it. Satisfied, he smiled. "Nice, that's enough." He continued to pick up the teeth and throw them at Godkin, injuring it further. Godkin roared, "I will become the king of fangs. I will be great." Azadin replied without hesitation, "Yes, you're right." Then he picked up a tooth and with all his might, threw it at Godkin, inflicting a severe wound. That's the end. As he picked up another tooth to attack, a voice shouted, "Soulless outsiders." Turning around, he saw the leader on the wall raising his hand to stop the soldiers. "What are you doing? Why are you helping those monsters?" Another soldier agreed, "He must have brought the monsters here." Azadin remained silent and listened to their accusations. The leader on the wall shouted, "It's all the fault of those outsiders." Azadin remained silent, looking back at them. Ugly faces and the people there appeared, and endless questions followed. Where did those monsters come from? This is too unusual. It's all his fault, that soulless outsider. At that moment, Azadin also spoke to explain, "I don't know where these monsters came from either." He stood below, looking up at the people on the wall. "As you know, I'm just here to complete the king's mission for a reward." Those who heard this explanation were surprised. Azadin continued, "And whoever did this, perhaps someone made a wish with a devil's gold coin." This statement terrified everyone. They looked at each other in disgust. What? Someone in the city wished on a devil's gold coin? Someone suddenly shouted, "Was it one of us?" But Azadin only replied, "I have no obligation to tell you that, and I don't have the right to tell you." The man gritted his teeth, but Azadin simply asked back, "So, can I go now?" He stood there, facing the people on the wall. "Or are you going to fight me for the king's church?" Hearing that, the people there immediately drew their bows at him, despite the fact that they were fleeing from the monster's minions. Someone there shouted to interrupt him, "Don't slander our faith." Seeing the anger, Azadin remained calm and said, "All right, you're all loyal subjects." Behind him, a crate was pushed open, and a bloody man crawled out. "Am I still alive? Is it all over?" Azadin looked at the man and called out to him. The man looked at him. He just smiled and said, "You've been given a second chance at life." Hearing those words, the man's face was filled with tears. Having said that, Azadin jumped straight onto the wall, surprising everyone there. The leader there, seeing the people below raise their bows, shouted, "Stop, don't attack." Azadin said nothing. He just went to the place where the arrows were stored and took a handful. "All right, I'll just take the arrows." Seeing that, the leader said, "Thank you." Hearing that, he smiled and took the number of arrows he wanted, then jumped down. In the forest, Azadin and the owl flew quickly. The owl suddenly spoke, "Gold coins, you're getting better at lying." Hearing that, he only replied, "If not, they would live in fear of being associated with me for the rest of their lives." The owl asked again, "Don't you hate them? They treated you like that even though you defeated the monster to help them." Azaden replied, "Humans are like that. It's just that no matter what, they still treated me well when I pretended to be blind, so they deserve some credit, really." He suddenly hesitated, "But I'm so tired. I even had to run when I was tired, and then I had to fight without a reward. It's annoying." Suddenly, he saw a light and ran closer. It turned out to be a group of children. Ishmael smiled when he saw him. "Azaden, you're here," a surprised voice said. "What? You defeated Godkin?" The two children looked at him. "You're so strong." Ishmael was silent for a moment, then exclaimed, "You're really wasting your strength. You didn't even get any gold for that." Hearing that, Azaden said, "Midiam said that protecting and helping people is a great thing. Life won't be fun if you have no sense of aesthetics." Azaden stood up and put on his coat. Midiam spoke up, "Ishmael is never a funny guy." Azaden turned back and asked, "It seems you two are free now. Did the evacuees let you go?" Midiam smiled and replied, "They tried to stop us, but we said we would defeat the monsters, so they let us go." Ishmael continued, "They're good people. They even gave us this torch. Plus, I bet they don't know we're Aragasa." Midiam suddenly said proudly, making Ishmael surprised, "And I'm beautiful too." Hearing that, Azaden teased Midiam, "So you mean they let you go because you're beautiful, even though you're still a child?" Midiam was angry. "I'm 13 years old. In the north, there's a queen who got married at this age." Suddenly, Azaden asked again, "Midiam, do you recognize this?" Azaden showed her the staff he had taken after the battle. Midiam examined it for a long time, then said, "I have to tell you the truth, I don't have the stamina right now." Suddenly, Midiam exclaimed, "So you admit me as your assistant?" Azaden shouted, "Do you think I'll use this to ask for help from someone I'm not familiar with?" Midiam said, "All right, in return, you help me with one thing." Azaden agreed, "You can check it tomorrow." Azaden jumped up to a tree branch. Midiam looked up and asked, "What are you doing?" He replied, "Hurry up, follow me." Midiam was surprised, "Why are we in such a hurry?" The group walked quickly through the night. Suddenly, a girl noticed Azaden. "Where have you been? The kids are looking for you." Azaden replied, "I got lost for a bit. The kids are smart, they'll catch up with us." Azaden said, "I heard the sound of victory from the village." The girl was surprised. "Really?" He smiled and said, "As you know, my hearing is very good. I think everyone can go back now." Hearing the people talking, Azaden continued, "You have a way to contact them like a lantern, right?" The girl nodded. Suddenly, an old man's voice rang out. "There." They pointed in a direction, and there were lanterns hanging. "They've won." The people there were all smiling happily. At that moment, Azaden spoke to the girl. "Everyone should send a group to check it out first." The girl happily replied, "Okay." The image of the previous moment flashed in his mind. He ran for a while and said, "I'm too lazy to do everything. I feel like I could take a nap if I lay down." Seeing the smoke rising, he stopped. "What is that smoke?" There, a group of soldiers were stationed. One soldier was talking to another. "A monster, but Margrave is still only looking for the Divine King's book instead of trying to protect the people. I think this place is done." The other soldier replied, "I only care about the money they pay us. If we work long enough and get paid for it, I'll do it." Azaden was hiding and watching. "This place must be where that bastard is hiding." Looking at the pile of stuff on the ground, he muttered, "I'm out of money." The owl on his shoulder looked at him and said, "Azaden, you hit the jackpot." He knelt on one knee and thought, "That's right, I need money now. Traveling costs a lot of money." As dawn broke, a voice shouted, "Are you kidding me?" Jarkiev pointed angrily at the guards. "Did you guys steal it? That's not why I hired you." The guards there explained, "But we were attacked, we couldn't even respond." Jarkiev put his hands on his hips and shouted back, "What are you saying? This was originally your responsibility." A man holding a knife cutting fruit spoke up, "You mean it's my fault?" Jarkiev pointed at the two men who were on duty last night. "I'll cut your pay, do you have any objections?" The man also replied, "As you wish." The man threw down the apple and stood up. "But my stuff is also missing. This isn't just a simple theft." Jarkiev asked again, "What did you lose?" He replied, "I can't tell you about that." Hearing that, Jarkiev rubbed his head. "So, is it important or not? If it's not important then—" The man interrupted Jarkiev. "Sir Jarkiev, we'll move to the next village. You should give the order to mobilize the troops in your jurisdiction." Jarkiev frowned. "The next village is ruled by a nobleman. It will be difficult." He pointed at the man's chest and asked again, "And why should I do that? Are you ordering me?" The man smiled. "All right, then I'll plunder that place in your name." With that, the man took the knife and stabbed Jarkiev in the stomach before he could react. "You bastard." The others were shocked, but the next scene terrified them even more. The man smiled calmly. "Don't worry, This knife is a gift from a sorcerer. The knife, stuck in Jarkiev's stomach, gradually turned into a spider that crawled into the wound. Then suddenly, Jarkiev returned to normal. The man asked him, "Do you feel normal now?" He shouted at the man, "What did you do to me?" The man whistled, causing Jarkiev to fall to the ground in pain. He smiled maliciously. "Relax, Sir Jarkiev. That spider is just a little poison. Now, you have to listen to me, or I'll let the spider lay eggs in your body, and when the eggs hatch, it will be a very interesting show." Jarkiev clutched his stomach and staggered to his feet. "What do you want from me?" The man put his hand on Jarkiev's shoulder, causing the other soldiers to panic. He laughed. "I'm going to steal the upcoming harvest, and I'll catch the rat who stole my stuff." As he listened, Jarkiev's face turned pale. Far away, Azadin and Midiam were sleeping soundly on a goat until morning. When they woke up, Midiam asked Azadin in surprise, "Do you have two staffs?" Azadin replied, "Last night when I was robbing the mercenaries, I saw one that looked like it, so I took it. This is exactly the item the goblin shaman used. Check it for me." He handed the staff to Midiam, but Ishmael quickly grabbed it. "I can do that too. It might be cursed." As soon as he said that, Ishmael used magic on the staff. Azadin asked him, "Do you see anything?" Ishmael replied, "I sense that the staff is green and black." Azadin continued, "If it belonged to the King of Fangs, you would see red. Maybe it belongs to someone else." Ishmael spoke up, "Yes, its function is to search for a specific target. It's like it was made to point at something, but it's not durable. It's easy to break. But the person who made it is extremely talented. They can create debris, but have better skills than most other magic tools." Looking at the staff in his hand, he thought, "A staff created to track copies of the Divine King's book, so there must be more than one, which means I have to deal with more trackers." Azadin took the staff and said, "Now, let's go find the people who lost this book." The place where the soldiers gathered last night was quite unpleasant. The people there were no longer lazy and relaxed like last night, but now they all had serious expressions, and they were constantly cleaning their weapons and armor. Azadin thought, the atmosphere there has changed overnight. They are preparing for a real battle, and their goal is to collect copies of the Divine King's book. He gritted his teeth. "I really don't expect anything when they find out about the missing staff, but thinking about them using absolute force." A question interrupted his thoughts. Midiam asked, "Do you see anything?" Azadin took a deep breath. "They're preparing to attack the next village." The statement shocked both Midiam and Ishmael. Midiam rubbed her chin and thought, "They can't do this arbitrarily. Maybe they have a reason to be so desperate." After hearing this, Azadin was silent for a long time. After disguising himself, he spoke. The three disguised themselves, pulled a cart, and went to the next village. The village was still bustling with people. At the public station, the guard at the gate looked at Azadin's travel document and said, "A blind man, I see. Be careful." He also replied, "Thank you." Midiam turned her head and looked back. "They actually let a blind man in for free, even though we tricked them," Ishmael added. Entering the village, the scenery amazed Midiam and Ishmael. It was a Korashar trade caravan. Ishmael was happy, and Midiam contentedly said, "Finally, we can rest." Azadin, who was pretending to be blind, spoke up, "The Guild of Peddlers, right?" In front of him, a man was pulling a cart. A memory surfaced. A young boy with blonde hair said to a dark-haired boy, "So you're the youngest coward, don't flatter yourself. After all, you're just the son of a traitor. The greatest genius of the family, becoming a messenger at the age of 3, that's what adults called Ariel back then." The two boys looked at each other. Ariel is a group, not just a single powerful individual. A young blonde man sat cross-legged in a tent, muttering, "Ariel." Not long ago, Korashar, the Guild of Peddlers, was originally a guild of small merchants, but now it has grown and become a large organization in Korashar. But the truth is that this is just one of 3 organizations run by the Herald family. In other words, the Aragasa people. So all the merchants of the guild are Aragasa people. Azadin's group of 3 walked on the main road. Midiam and Ishmael chatted happily. They had only taken a few steps when someone behind them shouted, "Look who it is! Isn't this the 108th famous spirit, Sir Azadin? How is being a messenger for 3 months going for you?" Azadin and Midiam looked at the 3 without saying anything. Seeing that, the 3 others became even more arrogant. "Only 3 months and you already have servants. What a talent you are." Azadin reluctantly spoke up. "These kids aren't my servants. Go away. Help me change its hooves. Can you do it?" The man led Azadin's goat. "Of course, if you say so. We'll certainly do it." He gave one of the 3 a bag and said, "Exchange this for money. You can exchange it for Blue River arrowheads when you have the goods." The man spoke up, "Oh my God, aren't you the one who became a messenger thanks to old Kasa's introduction?" Although there were no official procedures done, the other continued, "Even though you were the slowest in training, With that said, the three of them ignored him and opened the bag to discuss. These are all expensive things. He must be a messenger. He probably stole it on his way here. Azadin spoke up. I need a change of clothes. Can you wash this for me? Seeing this, Midiam and Ishmael whispered to each other. They have no respect at all. But no matter what the reason, helping is their duty because Azadin is a messenger. Hearing Azadin say so, they threw him a woman's dress. He sighed. Can you stop this childish game? The two of them argued with him. A loud argument was going on, and a voice cut in. If you're so upset about helping, why don't you settle this with a fight? Midiam sarcastically said. Or are you afraid of losing? One of them came to Midiam and said, Girl, you may not know, that guy is very likely to not be able to take a punch. Midiam smiled. Oh really? She suddenly jumped, causing everyone present to react too late. When everything was over, Midiam was sitting on the man's neck, a dagger placed right under his throat. He trembled and asked, Wait, what are you doing? Midiam slowly replied, Girl, you really don't realize what situation you're in, do you? We're in a challenge. How can you say such sarcastic things? Don't you like Harold Azadin? Why don't you stop talking and working? Can't take a punch. Don't joke. Have you seen Harold? You're neglecting your duty. Hearing Midiam say that, everyone present was stunned. Suddenly, a voice broke the tense atmosphere. A young blonde man stepped out of the crowd. Things seem to be too tense now. Long time no see. Azadin. Azadin replied, Yes. The man turned to Midiam. What's your name? Midiam replied, Midiam of Ether. The blonde man replied, I'm Derek of Savin. I apologize on behalf of the three of them. So can this end here? I don't want my companions to bleed. Hearing that, Midiam jumped back from the man's neck and stood beside Azadin. When the man was released, while asking if there was any blood on his neck, Derek went to the man and told him to try to do the guild's work. He came to Azadin and said, Azadin, take a bath and come here. At least we can have dinner together. He replied, Understood. That night, in Azadin's tent, he had just finished bathing and was wiping himself when he thought, I've really recovered after taking a bath. At that time, Ishmael in the bath next door called to him, Azadin, why are you standing there? Even if that's the situation you were born into. But Ariel, people of the same blood as you are respected, right? I heard that, those who challenge Ariel or are rude will have to pay a price. Azadin put on his clothes and calmly replied, Yes, she always has her own way of doing things. Ishmael exclaimed, You're so strange. Azadin smiled, That's why you should persuade Midiam or become as strange as me. A moment later, in Derek's tent, the two were having dinner. Suddenly, Azadin spoke up. Why? Derek sighed lightly. I'm asking, have you heard anything about Ariel? No, I haven't, Azadin replied. Derek asked him again. Are you really not interested in your only sister? Azadin calmly replied. Considering her abilities, there's nothing for me to worry about. Derek was surprised. Unbelievable. You've come all this way and started attacking the guild members, but when I ask for results, you turn away. Derek picked up the basket of apples and threw it at Azadin. Azadin sat up from the table, leaning on his arm. I'm doing the right thing and collecting gold, Derek sighed. Go away, I'll talk here. What about attacking other merchants and keeping their activities? Azadin, don't be like that. Derek looked at him. Have you ever seen anything like this? Azadin placed the staff on the table. This is what Bishop Kurt Godkin used to search for copies of the Divine King's book. The daughter of Ether has delivered the district leader's letter as far as I know. That's why she was called. Right. Azadin sat there, looking serious. It seems everyone knows. You didn't report it to the district leader, so are you the only one who doesn't know? Derek replied, Anyway, bringing this here is a good contribution, but it would be better if you brought a copy of the Divine King's book. Azadin replied, But I did. Derek was surprised. What? Azadin smiled. I guess all the other messengers returned empty-handed. Suddenly, Derek grabbed his wrist and shouted, Azadin, hand over the copy of the book. Azadin was surprised. Azadin sat still, saying nothing as he watched Derek slam the table and pant. The commotion was so loud that even Midiam and Ishmael outside could hear it. Derek shouted, Don't tell me you don't trust us. We can protect that book much safer than a weakling like you. Azadin remained calm. Derek, do you think that will cause you trouble? He took an apple and spun it. One of Margrave Castle's adopted children is coming. Among them is a heretic named Kurt. Derek pointed at his chest. You think we'll lose to them? Even though I might lose to Ariel, I'm also a former herald. Azadin said calmly, That's the problem. Tell me, how can a group of merchants fight a team of soldiers? Derek retorted, It doesn't matter. The copy is more important. Besides, you're much weaker than Ariel. Hearing that, Azadin sighed and covered his face. Are you talking about how we were kids? He thought, I couldn't beat Ariel back then, but compared to that time, I'm much stronger now. But Ariel is still the strongest warrior of humanity with countless followers at her feet. And I haven't seen her for many years, I can't imagine how strong she is now. Azadin shook his head. Anyway, I'll hand over the copy to the district director, that's the best thing. Hearing his answer, Derek gnashed his teeth. You arrogant brat, I'm your senior, you know. Before he could finish, a man ran in panic. Sir, we have a problem, at the East Gate. At that time, at the East Gate, the soldiers saw Jarkiev's group approaching. The soldiers stepped forward to stop them. Stop, you have too many people, camp somewhere else and come back tomorrow. Jarkiev smiled and replied, all right, Jaron. He handed a bag of money to the man called Jaron, whispering, consider this a little reward for your hard work. Jaron replied, you're putting me in a difficult situation, Sir Jarkiev. You're also a knight. Jarkiev smiled. If anything goes wrong, we'll be in the king's church together. We'll work together. Jaron replied, if you say so, then I. Before he could finish, the mysterious man behind Jarkiev lunged forward, stabbing Jaron in the eye, causing him to fall to the ground. Jarkiev's soldiers rushed forward, killing everyone there. Jarkiev said to the man, hey, I didn't want him to die. But the man calmly replied, you should be happy, sir. An attack wouldn't happen if we didn't do that. Jarkiev shouted, that's too much. There are 3 gates here. The man replied, that's no problem, don't worry. The man looked at his hand that had been bitten by bugs and blew on it. The bugs flew into Jarkiev's soldiers, causing them to scream in pain. After a while, those people stood up, their bodies filled with strength. Jarkiev gritted his teeth and looked at the man. You're a heretic of Kurt, the man smiled. You realized too late. The man continued, let's work together, young master. It will be a mutual help. I'll get the copy of the book and you'll get revenge. Moreover, he blew. Jarkiev was in so much pain that he knelt down and screamed, and you have no choice. He looked at the controlled soldiers and said, from now on, no one is allowed to leave this village, obey his orders. After hearing his orders, the soldiers started to run. At that time, the villagers were also gathering at the gate. One person asked, what's happening? Another replied, they won't let us leave. The man approached the guard and asked, why can't we leave? The guard replied mechanically, because we were told so. Another person started to shout excitedly, let's go out of here. You're nothing but mercenaries. Before he could finish, the guard's large hand grabbed his head. Suddenly, the expressions of both people became distorted. He said in a very creepy voice, I'm hungry. Then, bugs crawled out of the man's skin, and his face was deformed, scaring the man who was being held. Suddenly, Azadin appeared. He used a spear to pierce the guard, saving the other man. Looking at his spear full of baby spiders, he muttered, servants of the Spider Queen, Arthra.